Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. It is a city known for its charm and its challenges. With a Black population just above 60%, Baltimore is the most populated city in Maryland and the 30th most populated in the United States. So when it comes to politics, Baltimore is considered a heavy hitter for the state of Maryland. And tonight, we'll hear from the Greater Baltimore Urban League as we talk about politics, civil rights, economic empowerment, and more. It's also celebrating 100 years with a gala taking place next month. My guest is Trashia Rice, Chief Operations for the Greater Baltimore Urban League. She is a Baltimore native, activist, and part of the boots on the ground effort to help Baltimore live up to its charm city name. Trashia, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Harold. I'm happy to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about some fast facts in Baltimore. According to the U.S. Census, the median age in Baltimore City is 36. Now, 22% of children live in poverty, 22% of the elderly live in poverty, and 35% of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher. Mm-hmm. Now, crime in Baltimore is typically higher than the national average, although the homicide rate notably over the past year has dropped significantly. Mm-hmm. There is so much to talk about when it comes to the statistics, and even though Baltimore and the District of Columbia are only about 40 miles apart, culturally, socially, they are very, very different places. From your perspective as a native, when someone asks you about Baltimore, who perhaps have never visited Baltimore, and I should say specifically a Black person who asks you about Baltimore, what do you tell them?
Usually the first question that they ask is it really like The Wire, right? And so what I always tell people is that Baltimore, we have the culture here is unmatched, in my opinion. The arts culture here, the community and all the different communities. If you can go to the east side of Baltimore and one community and they'll behave completely different than a community in the west side of Baltimore, but it's still a sense of community in each place. So I always tell them that this is the city of charm and a city of love and all the things that you see. They highlight the things that are not so great about Baltimore, but they don't highlight the things that are great about the Baltimore.
You didn't mention the crab cakes.
Well, I did not mention the crab cakes. I love crab cakes, right? But I never mentioned because I never mentioned the crab cakes because they always talk about The Wire. While I love the show, Baltimore is not The Wire.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's that is very interesting, and my listeners do know, and maybe some of them don't know, but I live in Baltimore, even though I was raised in the DMV. And so certainly there are differences. I went to Morgan State, which is in Northeast Baltimore as well. And so there certainly are differences. But from the perspective of the Urban League, what do you believe are the biggest challenges that the organization is dealing with in 2024?
There are so many challenges that we deal with as an organization because we're an organization that's community rooted. So the issues in the community are the issues that we deal with. One of the things that has been or the forefront of every meeting that we have, every conversation that we have is assistance. People are just not making enough money in the jobs that they work in, and they need it's people that are making what some people would deem to be pretty good medium middle class wages that can't afford to pay their rent on time or can't afford to or can't afford to put food in their houses. So we deal with conversations and stuff like that on a daily basis. We have at least 10 or 15 phone calls where we're talking to different members of the community about those needs. So for me, I would say on the community level, that is the biggest issue for us.
One of the other issues, as I said in the very beginning, and there's a saying for those who are politically inclined in the state of Maryland.
Mhm.
As Prince George's and Baltimore go, so goes the state. If there is a statewide office that someone is running for, if they can't win Prince George's and or Baltimore, it's not going to happen. To what do you attribute Baltimore's political power and influence?
I believe that our political power and influence in the state of Maryland is huge. When first, I think as a city, we have to be charged, right? And so the right person or the right group of people have to be in front of us in order to be charged, right? Most of us are already charged because voting is something that we do because we have the right to do it. And so everyone that has the right to do it should do it. But realistically, in our communities, the Black community per se, right? You have to be charged to get out and vote and to get out and let your voice be heard. And so I think that they have to be charged.
And when you say charge, you mean that is the charge that most of the activists, even such as yourself,
Yes,
are tasked with.
yes.
And so how did someone such as yourself, you were born and raised in Baltimore, you are certainly a native, to get to where you are now, this is not the kind of position that you just kind of walk into. You do really have to be a boots on the ground kind of person. Talk to me a little bit about your activist walk as you moved into this position with the Greater Baltimore Urban League.
So this is an interesting question for me, Harold, because I always say I never applied for, like, I didn't seek the Urban League as a profession. The Urban League kind of found me. And I always say I was placed here by God because every single person at every level that we assist at some point in my life, I used to be. So I do this with a passion that I feel that only people who are from the city, right? Only people who have gone through the things that I've gone through in our city can do with the passion that I do it with. I see myself in the face of every single person that we talk to. I see myself in the face of every single person that we help. And because of that, I advocate as much as I can for the disadvantaged communities.
Drill down a little bit more. You said for the constituency that the Greater Baltimore Urban League serves, you said that in every stage of your life, you were one of those people. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Northeast Baltimore, and I grew up to parents who were addicted to drugs. And so thank God now both of my parents have over 30 years clean. My dad is not here anymore. My dad's actually from DC. But yeah. And so life for me then was not easy because both of my parents were addicted to drugs. And so all the hardships that a lot of the youth have right now, I had going through my life. And so we had to, but my dad worked for an amazing company that kind of put us on their backs and helped guide us through. So we didn't have to necessarily use a lot of the community resources because his company was amazing in the way that they assisted us. But so I see myself in the faces of those people that we help in those communities. I have a cleaning business. And so when I was first getting started, and I was I was going through my mind about what I really wanted to do, how to structure it, and how confused and unbalanced I was. Then I see myself in the faces of all the business owners that we help, within our entrepreneurship program. The students, I did not choose college as the route. I went to the military. But had I had something like the SLP program at my disposal when I was in school, I would have known the things that were offered to me in college, but I was not afforded those resources. I went to Lake
Mhm.
Clifton, right? Lake Clifton was an amazing school, but Lake Clifton poured into the children who I guess they deemed to be good kids, and I wasn't a great kid in school. So you know what I'm saying?
No.
I was not. You would not believe I was not a great kid, right? So, um, I didn't get the resources I needed, and there was not programs like the SLP in that school. And now our SLP program is a Saturday leadership program where we take different children, ages 8th through 12th grade on different college tours around the state of Maryland and the states that touch Maryland. And so we
Mhm.
teach them about leadership. We teach them about different career paths. We teach them about what college is like. And so I didn't have those resources. And so I left school and I went into the military. But prior to me going into the military, I left home um, because I thought I was grown. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I thought I could do it on my own. And so I left home. And so I then had to see myself in the people that are calling for the assistance and stuff like that. I saw myself there because I made a impulsive decision to leave home and my parents made me learn the hard way. And so, I see myself in the faces of every single person that we help. And so that is why I'm so passionate about the work that I do.
I wanted to talk briefly about the gala that is
Mhm.
coming up because, as I said, the Urban League is celebrating 100 years, and we can drill down a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
But first and foremost, give me the basics of the gala. When is it? Where is it? And how more people can get information about it?
So the gala is on November 9th, 2024 at the Hilton Baltimore Inner Harbor. It is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And if you want more information, go to www.gbul.org for ticket information. And the event is also on Eventbrite. You can search the Whitney M. Young Gala.
Okay, and slow down and tell me the website again, please.
Yes, www.gbul.org.
What will be the significance of this gala? I mean, I know you're going to have performers and the like, but why is this particular gala so significant to the organization?
So it's a few reasons that this is so significant. This gala is so significant to the organization because we celebrate 100 years. And it
Mhm.
is no more befitting time for us to celebrate 100 years in the most important election of any of our lifetime. So we celebrate 100 years in a very crucial time that is kind of deep rooted in what the Urban League is all about. And that's voter education, voting rights, and things like that.
Wonderful.
And
Go
I'm sorry, I do want to also add that the proceeds from this gala directly support all of our programming. So all proceeds directly support our entrepreneurship program, our CTAP program, our cybersecurity program, our youth, our B program, our SLP program, our podcast. It directly supports everything with the Greater Baltimore Urban League, auxiliaries included.
Indeed. I need you to hold on for a moment because I am going to take a break, but don't forget you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast. That's on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are continuing our discussion about the Greater Baltimore Urban League celebrating 100 years. My guest is Trishia Rice. She is Chief of Operations at the Greater Baltimore Urban League. Trishia, before the break, we were talking about the significance of the gala and, by extension,
Mhm.
the significance of the Greater Baltimore Urban League. Obviously, the Urban League
Mhm.
is is a national organization, and a lot of the same kinds of programs that you mentioned have been uh, are repeated,
Mhm.
in other cities, but specifically as it relates to Baltimore. And
Mhm.
again, kind of put on your Baltimore hat
Mhm.
for me. Uh, You're a young person,
Mhm.
and when it comes to issues of civil rights, um, how do you believe that the Greater Baltimore Urban League has remained relevant
Mhm.
when we have organizations such as Black Lives Matter and similar organizations
Mhm.
uh, essentially moving
Mhm.
in a much quicker pace?
Mhm.
And sometimes when you're talking about the Urban League, NAACP, these organizations that have younger activists
Mhm.
um, seem to be a bit more energetic.
Mhm.
So for younger people, how does the Greater Baltimore Urban League stay relevant and to reach those young voices and younger energy?
Absolutely. So, how we stay relevant, how the Greater Baltimore Urban League stays relevant, and how we have stayed relevant over the course of a century is through our programming, training, and services. We've stayed consistent. You were speaking, and you said that a lot of organizations move a lot faster than we do, but we've been consistent. So the turtle is going to win the race. You know what I'm saying? The hare does
I
the
see.
turtle's going to
Slow
win
and
the race
steady wins the race. I see.
slow and steady wins the race because we stay consistent in our programming. We stay consistent in our community. I'm sorry, civic engagement. We stay consistent in our programming. So I think that's what keeps us relevant. What what we do to bring the younger audience to the younger constituents to the Greater Baltimore Urban League is we do that through volunteerism. And so we have two volunteer auxiliaries. One is called the Greater Baltimore Leadership Association. The age range for that is 21 to 40. And so they have a heavy focus on mentorship, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And then the Guild is ages 41 and up, which you and I would be a part of. And so they have a heavy focus on voters' rights, entrepreneurship, civic engagement.
Mm. I'm sure that you have had an opportunity to watch the presidential speeches, Kamala Harris, obviously last night, Donald Trump during the day. Uh, Even as a nonpartisan, organization, no matter who wins this presidential election, what is the hope of the organization to continue to do the job that you're doing? What is it that you would hope would come out of the next presidential administration?
I would hope that the next presidential administration has a heavier focus on nonprofit organizations like ours and the programming that we provide to the communities. We do Nonprofits do get a lot of funding through federal governments, but it could be a lot more and a lot better for us to be able to impact a lot more people. Um, Prime example, we were given a grant for rental assistance, and
Hmm.
within 24 hours, the grant was exhausted. And yes, the grant was exhausted because that's how many people needed assistance. And then we had a backlog of about 300 or 400 people that still needed assistance after that. So that's what I'm talking about. Supporting nonprofits like the Greater Baltimore Urban League and other nonprofits that move in the same way that our mission does, supporting us with the funding to properly help the communities and focus more on equity than equality, because yeah, we all get a pair of pants, but not everybody's pair of pants fits the same way. So we have to focus more on the equity than the equality.
Interesting. You spoke about voting, for example.
Hmm.
Voting is underway.
Mhm.
not just when you're talking about the presidential election or even members of Congress, but for example, in Baltimore, there are all kinds of initiatives on on the ballot. What role does the Urban League play in educating people and what their choices are? I mean, for example, there is, I believe it's question F about
Mhm.
changes to the Baltimore Harbor. That
Mhm.
is a huge and
Mhm.
huge issue. The Baltimore Harbor is almost 50 years old. There is a initiative on the ballot that could shrink the size of the Baltimore City Council
Mhm.
or keep it the same. When you're talking to your constituencies, what are they telling you? Or do they know what's going on? Are they confused? Are they concerned? Talk to me about
So part of what we do with the guild is what took a huge responsibility in going around the city of Baltimore, all different areas. They didn't focus on one place, and providing education on the ballot, on what their voting rights were, on, we educated on everything with this election. And the guild is, but I believe they helped register over 88 people to vote. And we take a number.
88.
88. We've
Okay.
over 88 people to vote, and that's just us. I know we partner with the National Council of Negro Women, NAACP, and Black Girls Vote, and I think we each all have numbers, but we registered 88 people during that voter registration drive. And a lot of people do have a lot to say about the questions. Uh, I've not heard anyone for question H, which is removing the amount of city council members that we have, because Baltimore is a city that still needs a lot of assistance. And so if you remove city council members from any part of the area, then that area kind of doesn't have the proper representation that it needs. So
Mhm.
we're definitely, not for that. And the constituents definitely have a lot to say about the ballot
Mhm.
questions. Yes.
I want to play something for you. Last
Mhm.
month I had an opportunity to interview your national president,
Oh, great.
Mark Morial, and I asked him about the role of government
Mhm.
as it relates to the constituency that you serve. I'd like to have your thoughts about this on the other side.
Government has a role and a responsibility. Responsibility. Okay, a responsibility to invest in people. That's the fundamental issue. Invest in people. And that means investing in their ability to lift themselves up. And that's a distinct from what I call our safety net. I believe in a safety net. But people are not interested in handouts. They're interested in hand up. They're interested in investments that gives them a chance to stand on their own 2 feet, be employed, pay my bills, handle myself, or build a small business. That's what people are interested in. And the public narrative around people just looking for handouts and giveaways is a destructive narrative. It has a classist and a racist element to it, right? And it stymies and stifles our ability to build a 21st century economy.
Again,
Mhm.
that was the national president and
Mhm.
CEO, Mark Morial of the National Urban League. Uh,
Mhm.
your thoughts about what he was sharing?
I think that he is dead on. One of the things that I say that we do here at the Greater Baltimore Urban League is we remove the barriers that stop people from being able to excel at the way they want to excel. And that is, for the educational field, we remove the barriers by helping provide scholarships at the end of the year to the students that that are going off to college. And our CTAP, which is our Community Trades and Apprenticeship Program, we remove the barriers of the financial barriers that come with paying for construction program training. We pay for the program, but not only do we pay for the program, we provide the participants that are in the program a stipend to attend the program, because we understand while you're attending this, you're not able to work, but you still have bills that are coming. You still have to feed yourself and your family. So we provide stipends in our programs for our participants to be able to remove the barriers of stressing about how am I gonna eat if I can't work during these hours to earn the money to eat while I get this training. So we remove that stress of, we're going to give you the money to eat so that you don't have to worry about how you're going to eat, and you can focus on retaining this training. And so we do that in all of our programs. And so he is dead on, giving them what they need to excel. And that's all in alignment with equity.
One of the issues that both Baltimore and DC are dealing with, although on a much grander scale in DC, is housing gentrification. Baltimore has its issue with abandoned row houses. Mayoral administrations have struggled with this for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
Even, and I will just say from my personal experience, and this is one of the things that I found to be particularly heartbreaking, for example, is that when I was in undergraduate school in Baltimore at Morgan on Harlem Avenue, when I was living there in a row house, all of the row houses in that 1000 block, that 1000 block of Harlem Avenue, only less than a quarter mile from where the Freddie Gray incident took place. But this was again back in the 80s. Everyone on that street was Black, and they were homeowners. In 2024, half of the street now is just filled with homes that have been abandoned. They're boarded up, and probably most heartbreaking of all, some of them are completely gone because they have
Dilapidated. Yep.
And even as parts of the city are attempting revitalization, including this harbor initiative, and we are seeing on North Avenue, for example, which for those who are not familiar with it, in the DC metro area, North Avenue really essentially is in the northern part, runs east to west in the center northern part of the city. Oh, there is even some development there, new housing, and the light. And I think that some would argue that that's definitely a bright spot. But the housing is still an issue. What role do you believe the Urban League is playing or can play in addressing these issues?
So one of the things that we can do in addressing the housing issues is first educating our constituents on what they are able to do in the ways of purchasing a home. If they are not where they need to be to purchase the home, then we assist them to getting where they need to be to purchase that home. And we have relationships with different banks here in Baltimore that already do things like mortgage classes and homeowner trainings and things like that for our constituents. So we will be able to work closely with them to provide our constituents with what they need to be able to become homeowners, because we know that the cost of rent is so much more, it's like 2 to 3 times higher than what people are paying in their homes. And I think that a big part of the reason why we have so many of the abandoned houses and the houses that nobody is living in is because people can't afford to stay in these houses and in these neighborhoods. And then when they leave, honestly speaking, the neighborhoods have gotten so bad that people don't want to move into the neighborhoods because they're afraid of their safety. So, I mean, this is like a multi-dimensional problem. I don't think it's just one or two things that can fix it. I don't think it's just one or two organizations that could fix it. This is multi-dimensional and deep rooted here in Baltimore. So
and there have been obviously some significant improvements in sections of the city, and much to my surprise, even in the time that I have first of all lived here as an undergraduate person, came back and am seeing some changes. But one of the other things in dealing with the high cost of living, and I think this is really important, because as we are seeing metropolitan areas begin to blend, the areas south of Baltimore and the areas north of Washington, D.C., and you're beginning to see people commute, for example. And indeed, you have Washingtonians or people who work in the D.C. metro who are coming to Baltimore because it is cheaper to live here. Are you seeing more of that, or are you encountering that kind of issue, and what impact might that have in the years to come with these blending of metro areas?
We are seeing that. One of the things that I'm seeing more often than the blending of the metro areas are people leaving Baltimore City to go to the counties, or sometimes going to Pennsylvania and working here in Baltimore because it's cheaper. So it's just the cost of living. While it is cheaper than DC, it is more expensive than most other small cities in the area, and so a lot of people are moving down south. Some people are moving out the country. Because of the cost of living here in the United States. But to go back to your question, which was, I'm so sorry because I started talking.
No, that's quite all right. I was just saying, what impact do you believe that when you have this overlap of people from the DC area moving to Baltimore? And the reason I mention that is because I know, for example, there are public servants, firefighters, police officers, and others who may live in Baltimore, even though they work in the DC metro, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, or even in DC. Do you think that will help the economy of Baltimore, because you are seeing some of these people who are choosing to spend their money in Baltimore as opposed to in the DC metro, for example?
I do think that it will help the economy, and I also think that with a lot of the new developments that are happening in the jobs that will be offered through those developments and the comfort of living, I think that all of those things will be impactful too. Yes.
If you had your druthers, what is it outside of obviously economic support, but what does the Urban League really need? I dare say for the next 100 years, but I'm not going to put you in that position. But I will say,
I think that you can, though, because
it's
consistent. We need organizations, because let's go back to the equity portion.
Okay.
Right? If you get we both get pairs of pants. You get a size 16. I get a size 16, but I can't fit a size 16. That 16 is going to fall off of me. So now I need you to either give me a belt or give me a different size, right? And so that different size might cost a little bit more money than what your size 16 does, but that still gives us the equal amount, the equal item and the equity to allow us to be able to wear that item comfortably. So, breaking that down, if you know what I'm saying. So I believe that I went on a tangent and forgot what I was saying. I'm so sorry. You can edit this, right?
Well, let me just say that if you look at
Yeah.
if you really look at what the Urban League needs to have as far as resources, leadership, to continue to be relevant, not just over the next 100 years, but obviously over the next 10 years. The country is changing, attitudes are changing.
Mm-hmm.
The Black people have never been monolithic, but some would argue that they are even more diverse in their thinking than they ever have been before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I think that what we need in the Greater Baltimore Urban League is for organizations to and for the government and for the community to know about the work that we do, to see the work that we do, and to believe in the work that we do enough to want to invest in the work that we do so that we can continue to build a better Baltimore.
Are you concerned about competition from other nonprofits? Obviously, there's enough work to go around, but are there enough resources for other nonprofits and the national and the Greater Baltimore Urban League, for example? If everyone is trying to get the money and the other resources to help the same kind of constituency?
That is always something that is not concerning, but something that is always a topic, because it is a small pool of funding, and there are so many nonprofits here in Baltimore City, and a lot of the nonprofits' missions align. But I will say this with probably all the confidence in the world, that there's no nonprofit like the Greater Baltimore Urban League that covers the wide variety of issues that we cover. So I believe that people investing in that is what they need for the next 100 years, investing in our mission, which is to enable African Americans to attain economic self-reliance, parity, power, and civil rights. That mission is so broad because it allows us to be able to impact every single person in the community in any way that we can fit them in our mission.
For the next administration in Baltimore City, because again, there is an election in less than 7 days. What is the Urban League's message to the city administration, to the members of the House that are seeking re-election? What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that the Greater Baltimore Urban League will always stand for advocacy for disadvantaged communities. And so anything that anything that the state governments and the new administration is able to do to help better not the Urban League, but the communities in Baltimore, what we will ask them to do. And that is whatever they need to do to better the communities in Baltimore, because there are so many communities here that are broken and that need to be fixed. And the city governments and the leadership can help us, which they've already been doing. As you said, the murder rate has dropped while other crime has gone up, but the murder rate,
some of those economic crimes.
Yes, the murder rate has dropped. So we have been doing work in the city. I just think that as an administration, there's just so much more. And as a community, because the government can't do it on their own. It has to be government and community working alongside each other to get the job done. So.
Okay. One more time before we go. The gala, where is it going to be? When? And what can folks expect from it next month?
Yes, one more time. The gala is going to be November the 9th, 2024 at the Hilton Baltimore Inner Harbor from 6 to 10 p.m. You guys can expect Tony to come and sing that favorite "It's Our Anniversary." And it's not more fitting because we turn 100 years this year. We are honoring some dynamic people like Governor Wes Moore, First Lady Don Moore. We're honoring Edia and Sylvia Brown, who have been champions in the philanthropy and economic development here in Baltimore. We're honoring Janet Carey. We're honoring Andrea McDaniels, who's a veteran journalist and the managing editor at the Baltimore Banner. We're honoring David Bramble, who is MCB Real Estate. You know, we're honoring Delegate Scott Phillips and so many more. And one last thing before we finish, we are also having a dynamic host of presenters, and one such as media mogul and Urban One founder, Kathy Hughes. So yeah, that's huge.
Well, I want to thank you so very, very much, Tertia Rice, for sharing, your thoughts, not just about, the Greater Baltimore Urban League, but also, your Baltimore perspective. As I said, Washington, D.C. and Baltimore are only 40 miles apart, but they are very different, but yet they are bonded in the fight for equity, civil rights, and for the betterment of people of color. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, October 30th. I'm Harold Fisher.